A scream tears through the night before the storm is even seen. Flames burst upward from a shattered Viking outpost, sparks spiraling violently into the black sky as snow begins to fall in thick, blinding sheets. Figures run through the firelight, shadows stretched and broken across the ground. A chained man stumbles forward, his bare hands raw and bleeding as iron rings bite into his wrists. Another is dragged beside him, feet slipping across frozen earth, breath bursting from his lungs in sharp, panicked clouds. The wind howls between burning beams, carrying the scent of smoke, blood, and wet fur. Somewhere beyond the collapsing walls, something moves in the darkness, heavy and slow. The Viking warrior emerges through the smoke, tall and powerfully built, wolf fur cloak whipping behind him, dark blonde hair bound back with loose strands snapping across his face. His blue-gray eyes cut through the chaos, cold and alert. He lifts his iron axe and brings it down into the ice beside a fleeing slave, stopping him without striking flesh. The impact echoes like thunder. The slave freezes, chest heaving, eyes wide with terror, staring up at a face carved by scars and winter. Nearby, the Viking woman moves swiftly through the confusion, her dark green wool dress and fur-lined cloak streaked with ash and snow. She pulls a child from beneath a fallen beam, wrapping him against her chest as embers hiss and die around her boots. Her light blue eyes search the fire-lit ruin with calm urgency, counting the living, ignoring the dead. Above them, the storm deepens. Snow swallows flame. Wind tears banners from posts and scatters them into the dark like wounded birds. The captives are forced onward, away from the burning settlement, dragged toward the forest's black edge. Chains clink rhythmically, a cruel heartbeat against the rising silence beyond the fire. The slaves stumble into the trees, branches clawing at their faces, roots waiting beneath the snow to trip the weak and the slow. A shadow crosses the tree line. The Viking hunter steps from behind a trunk, spear in hand, eyes sharp beneath frost and fur. He scans the darkness, pausing when a distant howl rises, thin and long, carried through the storm like a blade drawn slowly across stone. He signals once, low and precise, and the march continues. Deep within the forest, the air grows heavy, muffled by snow-laden branches. The slaves huddle closer together, not for warmth, but for the fragile illusion of safety. Their breath rises in ghostly plumes, faces pale, lips cracked, eyes hollow with hunger and fear. A black shape moves between the trees. The group halts. Snow falls louder now, thick flakes striking leather, fur, skin. Somewhere close, a branch snaps under unseen weight. One slave turns his head slowly, dread tightening his jaw. Another tightens his grip on the chain as if it might anchor him to the living world. The Viking warrior raises his axe slightly, not in threat, but in warning, to the forest itself. The wind shifts, and the night listens. The forest closes behind them like a living gate. Snow thickens beneath the towering trees, muting every footstep, swallowing every sound except breath and the faint clink of chains. The slaves move deeper into the dark, shoulders hunched, eyes darting at every shifting shadow. Frost gathers in their hair and brows, turning fear into something pale and ghostly. The wind weakens here, replaced by a heavy stillness that presses against the ears. A narrow ravine opens before them, its black stone walls glazed with ice, rising sharply on both sides like the jaws of a frozen beast. One slave slips, crashing to his knees, palms scraping against jagged rock. The The chain pulls tight around his wrists before he can rise, dragging him forward as he gasps through clenched teeth. They emerge into a clearing, scarred by broken branches and half-buried fire pits, remnants of forgotten camps and failed survival. The snow lies thinner here, stained dark in places where ice has been shattered by falling limbs. A thin stream cuts through the clearing, its surface sealed with glassy ice. A man kneels beside it, striking the ice with a trembling fist until it cracks. He drinks too fast, choking, coughing violently, the sound tearing through the silence like a challenge to the forest itself. The air shifts. From between the trees, a gray wolf steps forward, winter fur thick and bristled, pale amber eyes burning in the dim light. Another follows, then another. Their bodies move low and silent, forming a slow, widening arc around the clearing. Breath steams from their jaws, curling into the cold air like smoke from unseen fires. The slaves back away instinctively, chains tightening, bodies pressing inward toward one another. Panic spreads without a word spoken, carried only through eyes and trembling hands. Then the ground trembles. A massive brown bear bursts from the undergrowth, fur crusted with snow, dark eyes locked forward. It rises briefly on its hind legs, roaring, a sound that rips through the clearing like tearing iron. The Viking hunter follows, spear slicing the air in a precise thrust that halts a lunging wolf, forcing it back with a sharp snarl. Snow swirls violently, as if the forest itself recoils. One by one, the wolves retreat, melting into the trees, eyes never leaving the humans. The bear halts, breath surging in heavy clouds, then turns and crashes back into the darkness, its passage shaking snow loose from the branches above. Silence returns, fragile and absolute. The slaves stand trembling, staring at the warriors, unsure whether they face salvation or another form of doom. The Viking warrior lowers his axe slowly, scanning the forest once more before turning toward the broken figures before him. The storm whispers again through the trees, and the forest, for now, allows them to live. The forest exhales slowly after the chaos, as if testing whether the danger has truly passed. Snow drifts down again, softer now, settling on torn branches, shattered ice, and the still shaking bodies of the slaves. No one speaks. Their silence weighs heavier than the storm itself, carried in the way their eyes avoid one another, in the way their shoulders remain tight, as if the beasts might rise again from the dark at any moment. The Viking warrior steps forward, boots crunching through fresh snow, wolf fur cloak heavy on his shoulders, breath steady despite the cold biting through leather and wool. The Viking hunter moves beside him, spear held low, eyes sweeping the forest with relentless focus. They do not rush. They do not soften their presence. Every movement declares that survival here is earned, never granted. A slave collapses to his knees, exhaustion finally overtaking fear. Another follows, then another, bodies sinking into the snow as if surrendering to the land itself. Their faces are pale masks of hunger and frostbite, eyes hollowed by days of terror. The Viking woman emerges from the trees, her fur-lined cloak drawn tight, ash-blonde hair braided along her temples. She kneels beside one of the fallen, offering a small water skin, her movements calm, efficient, gentle without weakness. They guide the survivors along a narrow, rising path where the trees grow thinner and the wind sharpens. At the crest of a frozen ridge, the land opens wide. Below, a valley stretches into mist, and in the far distance, the shapes of a Viking settlement appear. Low roofs buried in snow, thin columns of smoke lifting into the gray sky. The slaves stop, staring. Some sink to their knees in disbelief. Others remain standing, frozen, afraid that moving might shatter what their eyes are barely daring to accept. From the ridge steps the Viking elder, tall yet stooped with age, long white-gray beard stirring in the wind, carved staff planted firmly into the ice. His faded blue eyes study the survivors in silence, as if weighing their suffering without words. The Viking warrior approaches him and stops a few steps away. Snow drifts between them like falling ash. The elder lifts his staff slightly, a quiet gesture of judgment and permission combined. Nearby, the blacksmith tends a small forge carved into stone. Embers glow beneath iron and ash, sparks rising gently, casting warm orange light across his soot-darkened face. The fire does not roar, it breathes, fragile yet stubborn against the cold. The Viking woman guides the survivors toward the warmth, wrapping cloaks around trembling shoulders, pressing steady hands against frozen skin. Steam rises from melting snow, from breath warming the air, from life refusing to surrender quietly. A child steps forward, small and pale, blue eyes reflecting the firelight. He looks from the flames to the warrior, then back towards the dark forest behind him. His face holds neither joy nor sorrow, only a fragile understanding carved too early by fear and cold. The Viking warrior kneels, lowering himself to the child's height, axe resting beside him. For a brief moment, the hardness in his eyes softens into recognition. The child touches the fur of the warrior's cloak, then pulls back, startled by his own courage. Snow continues to fall. Behind them, the forest stands silent and endless, holding every story it has swallowed. Ahead, the fire crackles quietly, fragile yet defiant. Between shadow and flame, the story of the Viking slave does not end. It endures.